Hi, I'm René Haveman, and this is Farm Future News, episode 18. Welcome in this episode. This episode will concentrate on the remnants cows, sheep, goat. They are a category of animals that have a different digestion system as the non-remnant animals. And it needs also a specific treatment towards their menu. To understand what to feed cattle, goat, and sheep, it is good to understand how their intestines are working, how their digestion is working. That's why we will start with a video from 10 University who explain the working, the symbiosis within the intestines, the digestive system of remnants.
The four chambers in the stomach of ruminant animals enables them to get most of their energy from eating plants. I'm Dr. Tara Felix, the Penn State Extension beef specialist.
And I'm Dr. Jessica Williamson, the Penn State Extension forage specialist, and we want to talk about ruminant animals and their nutrition. Ruminant animals, such as cows, goats, and sheep, have a unique gastrointestinal tract that allows them to digest plant materials. The ruminant stomach has four unique chambers: the reticulum, rumen, oomacum, and abomasum.
Of these four chambers that make up the stomach of the ruminant animal, the rumen may be considered the most functionally important. The rumen is the primary site of digestion and absorption of nutrients. In fact, the mature cow, for example, derives approximately 70 to 80% of its daily energy requirements from this nearly 40-gallon vat. Researchers can put a window or cannula, like the one pictured here, into the rumen in order to be able to study this important organ.
The rumen's tremendous capacity for absorption stems from its many finger-like projections called papillae, and increase the surface area of the rumen and allow for increased absorptive capacity.
The energy requirements of ruminant animals are met predominantly through the production of volatile fatty acids, or VFAs. VFAs are produced by microorganisms that live in the rumen in a symbiotic relationship with the host or ruminant animal.
This symbiotic relationship is mutually beneficial to both the animal and the microorganisms. On the one hand, the microorganisms benefit by having a warm, wet, nutrient-rich environment to reside in, the rumen.
At the same time, the microorganisms in the rumen break down the feed that the animal ingests, converting it to VFAs and microbial protein to supply high-quality nutrients for the ruminant animal.
A major benefit that the ruminant animal gets from this symbiotic relationship is the ability of microorganisms to digest fiber or forage sources. One of the primary carbohydrates in forages is cellulose. Only microbial enzymes can break down cellulose. There are no enzymes produced by the ruminant animal itself that can break this carbohydrate down.
Thus, without microorganisms, the animal would not be able to consume grasses, for example, and survive. As a result, the major benefit of microorganisms in the animal is to provide energy to the ruminant animal by breaking plant materials down into volatile fatty acids.
In addition, the microbes themselves benefit the host by providing a source of protein for the ruminant animal. As microorganisms grow and reproduce, older ones die or simply follow the flow of digesta out of the rumen. They are then available in the small intestine as a high-quality source of protein to the ruminant animal.
The microorganisms also supply the majority of the ruminant animal's requirements for B vitamins and vitamin K, which reduces the animal's reliance on outside supplements.
In return for all their hard work, the microorganisms get a benefit as well. They get to ride along in the rumen environment, a perfect habitat for them.
The rumen environment is wet, devoid of oxygen, and warm. All the things that help microorganisms thrive. The ruminant animal continually eats feed, which adds substrates to the rumen environment for the microorganisms to break down and use for fuel and growth.
In addition, the animal's constant salivation through chewing and swallowing helps to buffer the acids produced by the microbes so that the environment remains at a relatively stable pH, which is important for the survival of both the microorganisms and the animal.
Finally, ruminant animals clean house, so to speak, for the microbes by removing the microbial waste, which are volatile fatty acids and dead microorganisms, and by eliminating the gases produced by microbes through a process known as eructation or belching.
This symbiotic relationship between the ruminant animal and the microorganisms is essential for the animal to be able to survive and thrive when being fed forages and other plant material.
In sub-Saharan Africa, we see that many farmers and herdsmen are feeding cattle and other ruminants whatever is on the road. Many herdsmen are coming from the dry north and bringing their herds towards the south. And there is little choice. The professional farmers, they have far more choice. And it is important to understand why you, as a farmer, have to provide your animal top quality feed. So let's see what it means. What is top quality feed?
Ruminant animals are somewhat unique in their ability to use forage as their primary feed. However, the quality of that forage will.
And we want to talk to you about forage quality. Forage quality should not be confused with forage nutritive value. Forage nutritive value generally refers to the chemical composition of the plant itself, the energy, crude protein, and fiber components, things you might expect to see on your forage analysis, for example.
Forage quality refers to a broader definition that not only includes forage nutritive value, but also forage intake and how palatable that forage is. Forage quality is more reflective of the potential feeding value of the forage than the forage nutritive value alone.
Forage quality is thus relative to the nutritional needs of the class of livestock that is consuming it. For example, the sheep on the left is in mid-gestation and is fully mature and not in lactation. However, the heifer on the right is still growing, in addition to trying to support a pregnancy. Thus, the heifer's nutritional needs far surpass those of the mature ewe on the left. Because of this, the quality of forage that they consume should be adequate to meet each of their individual needs.
At the early stage of growth, plants are vegetative and have very high crude protein and energy concentrations, and the forage quality overall is very high. The digestibility of plants depends greatly on the stage of maturity, the species, and the variety of the plant itself.
This is because plants are made up of millions of cells, and within those cells, there are cell contents that include proteins and sugars and are completely digested by the ruminant animal.
Surrounding the cell contents are cell walls. The cell wall makes up anywhere from 40 to 70% of the cell. Unlike the cell contents, the digestibility of the cell wall is highly variable.
Cell walls include cellulose, hemicellulose, lignin, and pectin. In general, these components are referred to or thought of as the fiber components or fiber fraction of a forage. Generally speaking, the more mature a forage is, the greater the cell wall or fiber fraction the plant has.
The cell contents, or sugars, starch, and pectin, are found in the greatest concentrations in immature vegetative forages. The cell walls, or hemicellulose and cellulose, are moderately digestible. The cell wall also contains lignin, which is completely indigestible and is primarily found in very mature forages.
As the plant matures, the proportion of the cell wall increases relative to the cell contents. As a result, digestibility and palatability potentially decline because of the increasing lignification in that plant. But as the plant matures and grows, the yield or dry matter available for feed increases as well. So the trick is to balance these two factors.
Because these proportions between cell contents and cell walls, or the fiber fraction, are so important to how the animal uses the forage, the fiber fractions of forage are analyzed as part of the determination of the forage nutritive value.
The most frequently discussed fiber analyses for the ruminant animals are NDF and ADF, also known as neutral detergent fiber and acid detergent fiber.
Neutral detergent fiber contains the cell wall contents, hemicellulose, cellulose, and lignin, and a little pectin. Acid detergent fiber is composed of cellulose and lignin only. Both are inversely correlated with digestibility. In other words, as the NDF and ADF concentration of the forage increases, the ability of the animal to digest that forage declines.
As forages mature and the fiber fractions increase, the material will be less digestible and it will pass out of the rumen more slowly. So the animal will be able to eat less. This is because the rumen is physically restricted to a specific capacity. Starch and sugars are rapidly fermented, generally within the course of a few hours. But it can take 24 to 48 hours to digest the NDF and ADF fractions of plants.
Thus, the fiber fraction is inversely correlated to digestibility and linearly correlated to forage maturity. Protein, on the other hand, is inversely correlated with forage maturity. As forages continue to mature, the concentration of crude protein to dry matter declines. This picture depicts cows grazing a mature pasture.
At this point, you may be asking, what can you do to improve your forage quality? Because of the relationship between fiber, digestibility, and forage maturity at the time of grazing is the most important factor that we can control to improve forage quality.
Forage species and forage variety should be considered when managing forage quality as well. Familiarize yourself with forage species and varieties within species, and make your planting decisions based on the needs of your operation. Other factors that can play a role in forage quality are pests and climate. However, these are more difficult to.
So we know now how the intestines is working, what is the optimum quality feed. But now finally, we have circumstances on our farm, and what fits now the best to our farm and our climatological circumstances. And if we have small cows or we have lambs, do they need specific feed? Let's see.
Control.
Now that we understand the difference between forage nutritive value and forage quality, we can investigate ways to best match the forage quality to a specific class of livestock that we may be working with.
Even within the same species, livestock have different nutritional needs as they grow and mature through different phases of life. I'm Dr. Jessica Williamson, the Penn State Extension Forage Specialist.
And I'm Dr. Tara Felix, the Penn State Extension Beef Specialist, and we want to talk to you about some specific examples of how to match forage quality to the nutritional requirements of livestock. Let's start with cattle. Mature bulls and dry cows have the lowest nutrient requirements of any class of cattle. The forage quality that would best match this class of cattle would be about 50% TDN, or total digestible nutrients. Total digestible nutrients is a calculation based on forage nutritive value. This class of cattle would also require about 9% crude protein, regardless of whether we are feeding grazed or harvested forages.
The nutrient requirements from most mature cows and bulls can easily be met through forages alone, yet management of the forages is still needed to ensure forage quality is maintained. Mismanaged forages, resulting in very poor quality mature forage, will not even meet the basic nutrient requirements of these mature animals that have the least nutrient requirements of any other class.
Growing heifers and yearling bulls have greater nutrient requirements than mature cattle. This class of cattle requires forages that contain about 65% TDN and 12% crude protein. In order to meet the nutritional needs of growing animals, closer attention must be paid to what forages are being offered. Their nutritional needs are greater than mature stock, so feeding less mature forages that have a greater nutrient concentration is essential.
Adding clovers or other legumes could be an easy way to boost overall nutrient composition and help ensure the protein and energy requirements of these younger animals are being met.
Finally, stocker calves are ideally gaining at least 2 pounds a day, and these stocker calves have the greatest nutritional requirements. About 70% or more TDN and 16% crude protein are required for this class of livestock. Implementing a managed grazing system for stocker cattle is essential and must be followed in order to meet their nutritional requirements throughout the grazing season. If being fed a harvested forage, a forage analysis should be done prior to feeding to ensure that the nutrient requirements will be met. When managing stocker calves, feeding forages in the actively growing early stages of maturity is essential.
Sheep, on the other hand, need an overall higher forage quality than cattle. Non-lactating ewes have the lowest needs of any class of sheep. They can survive on cool season grasses without a lot of legumes. We generally consider forages with about 55% TDN and 9.5% crude protein to be adequate for this class of sheep.
When ewes begin to lactate, however, they will need much more energy and protein, about 65% TDN and 14% crude protein. Thus, when managing lactating ewes, it is especially important to pay attention to forage maturity to ensure adequate protein and energy levels are available. This increase in protein and energy requirements is even greater if that ewe is young and still growing herself, especially if she has more than one lamb. Now, twins are typical in sheep, and the ewe's nutrient requirements have to increase to support adequate lactation if she has 2 lambs. In this case, shoot for about a TDN of 70% and a crude protein of close to 16%.
In order to meet the nutritional requirements of finishing lambs, we typically need to feed cool season annual grasses plus legumes to provide them with enough protein and energy.
There are a few things to remember about grazing management when it comes to the balance between forage nutritive value and forage quality. Ruminants need to be given the opportunity to maximize their consumption of forages throughout the whole production process, and at no time should they be restricted in their intake of forage. For example, overgrazed pastures will not only result in poor long-term pasture productivity, but will also cause ruminants to have restricted forage intake and can result in poor average daily gains.
Rotational grazing, or rotating animals from one paddock after they have grazed the forage down to the desired height and then moving them into another ungrazed paddock, has been shown to increase stocking rate and carrying capacity of the pasture, and in some cases has even contributed to greater animal performance. Rotational grazing is a great way to manage when and where your livestock are grazing on perennial pastures, and to control the stage of maturity at which the forages are being grazed.
Strip grazing is another managed grazing system that works well when grazing annual or stockpiled forages. A forward fence should be placed as livestock are moved across the field to limit the space that is available to graze to optimize forage availability and reduce forage waste.
Regardless of the species of livestock and species of forage, some type of managed grazing system should be employed to control the stage of forage growth to better match the nutritional needs of the animals, distribute nutrients evenly across the pasture, possibly reduce parasite load, and increase the possibility of improved pasture health.
A continuously grazed system, like you're seeing here, is allowing the livestock to graze freely when and where they wish. This type of system is not ideal, as it leads to overconsumption in some areas of the pasture and underconsumption in other areas, which reduces the overall sustainability of a pasture system and allows the encroachment of undesired weeds and a reduction in total forage availability.
Knowing the nutritive value of your forages and how to manage grazing resources can help you match the appropriate forage quality to the need.
If you want to have a well-driving herd, it makes no difference if it is cows, goats, or sheep. Feed is very important. It's crucial, just like us human beings. Well, nutritious food is crucial. I hope you did not find it too theoretic or too heavy. If you have any questions, let us know. As much as we can, we will answer them. I want to thank you for watching until the end of this video. If you have liked it, please put that thumb up and subscribe to this channel. Hopefully, we'll have a next episode next week. Thank you very much.